Listen carefully to what happened to Dr. Carlos on the night everything changed. A night that began with existential dread and ended with knowledge that humanity wasn't ready to hear. Do you feel it? That gnawing sensation that something massive is coming, that invisible pressure building in your chest, whispering that time is running out for something you can't quite name? Carlos felt it too, and he discovered why. At 42 years old, this astrophysicist had spent 2 decades studying cosmic patterns, searching for meaning in the mathematics of the universe, only to find the answer delivered to his backyard by something not from this world. What the being revealed wasn't about asteroids or solar flares, it was about a cyclical event encoded into Earth's very existence, a reset that happens with clockwork precision every 26,000 years, and we are living in the final countdown. The being showed Carlos that this reset doesn't destroy, it divides, splitting reality itself into 2 distinct frequencies, 2 versions of Earth occupying the same space, but experiencing radically different existences. And here's what should disturb you most. The division has already begun. You're witnessing it in real time. The inexplicable chaos, the impossible polarization, the feeling that people around you are becoming strangers, speaking different languages even when using the same words. Carlos learned that these aren't random symptoms of a troubled world. They're the early stages of a consciousness split that will culminate between 2025 and 2033. The question keeping his awake now isn't whether the reset is coming, it's whether you're making the choices that determine which version of reality you'll be locked into when the split completes. If you want to discover what the alien revealed about the timeline, about the mechanism of division, and about the specific choices that determine your trajectory, subscribe now and turn on notifications. And if you're ready to understand the deeper truth about consciousness, reality, and your role in this cosmic transition, check our ebook in the first pinned comment. The alien's message to Carlos wasn't chosen randomly, it was delivered to his specifically because of where he stood in that moment, suspended between 2 worlds, his rational scientific mind crumbling under the weight of questions that physics couldn't answer. To understand why he was selected, you need to feel the desperation that consumed his in the months before contact. Carlos had everything that should matter: tenure at a prestigious university, groundbreaking research published in the most respected journals, a beautiful home in the mountains outside Boulder, Colorado, financial security that most people only dream about. But for the past 8 months, he had been waking up at 2:47 in the morning, the exact same time every night, his heart racing, his mind spinning with a terror he couldn't name. His wife Sarah slept peacefully beside him, their 10-year-old son Emma safe in the room down the hall, everything externally perfect. But Carlos would lie there in the darkness staring at the ceiling, feeling like he was suffocating under the weight of a question he couldn't articulate. Why does everything feel wrong? He would think this every night. I have the career I worked for, the family I wanted, the recognition I sought. So why does it all feel hollow? Why does every achievement feel like I'm collecting meaningless trophies in a game I never agreed to play? He had tried explaining it to Michael 3 months ago, stumbling over words that couldn't capture the sensation. It's like, "I've been following a script my entire life," he had said, "and I just realized the script was written by someone else for purposes I don't understand." Michael, practical and loving, had suggested therapy, maybe burnout, maybe hormones, maybe the stress of his latest research grant. Carlos went to 3 sessions before realizing the therapist was trying to fix a problem that wasn't the real problem. The emptiness wasn't depression, it was recognition. Recognition that everything he had been taught to value, scientific achievement, intellectual status, material success, was somehow missing the point entirely. And that terrified his, because if those things weren't the point, then what was? What had he been doing with his 42 years? He started reading, voraciously, desperately, books he would have dismissed as pseudoscience 2 years ago. Consciousness studies, quantum mysticism, ancient philosophy, anything that might explain the growing chasm between his external success and his internal desolation. His office became cluttered with texts about simulation theory, parallel realities, the nature of time. Colleagues noticed, whispering about Carlos losing his edge, getting distracted by fringe theories, but Carlos didn't care because something in those books resonated with a part of his that his physics education had taught his to ignore. The part that knew somehow that reality was far stranger than the equations suggested. That particular October night, the night everything changed, Carlos had given up on sleep by 3:15. He walked to his home office, passing Emma's room where his son slept peacefully, oblivious to his father's crisis. Carlos sat at his desk, surrounded by star charts and consciousness literature, feeling the familiar weight of that unnamed urgency. "Time is running out," his body screamed, though his mind couldn't explain what time or running out for what. He stared at his research, years of work on cosmic cycles, on the precession of the equinoxes, on the mathematical patterns that governed stellar movements. Patterns he had studied objectively, scientifically, never considering they might mean something beyond pure physics. At 3:47, Carlos walked outside onto his deck, the cold October mountain air sharp against his face, the stars brilliant in the unpolluted darkness above Boulder. He often came out here when insomnia struck, finding something comforting in the vastness of space, in the reminder that his problems were cosmically insignificant. But tonight, staring up at the familiar constellations, he felt something different. Not insignificance, but connection, as if the stars themselves were trying to communicate something his training had taught his to ignore. And then it happened, not gradually, but instantly. One star, a bright point in the constellation Orion that he had observed 1,000 times, began to move, not the slow drift of a satellite or the streak of a meteor, but controlled, deliberate movement, descending toward his location with impossible precision. Carlos's scientific mind immediately started calculating trajectories, ruling out conventional explanations, even as his body froze with a primal response that bypassed intellect entirely. The object descended silently, no jet engines, no propulsion sounds, just a low-frequency vibration that he felt in his bones before he heard it. Within 30 seconds, it was hovering above his backyard, 20 meters away, close enough that he could see it wasn't a craft in any conventional sense, but something that seemed to exist between states, solid and fluid simultaneously. Its surface reflecting the starlight while also emitting its own luminescence, a soft blue-white glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Carlos stood completely still, his astrophysicist brain screaming contradictions. The object was approximately 6 meters in diameter, spherical but somehow not quite three-dimensional, as if it occupied more spatial dimensions than his eyes could properly process. The surface appeared metallic, but moved like liquid mercury, constantly flowing while maintaining shape. And then an opening formed, not a door sliding open, but the material itself dissolving, and something emerged. The being was tall, roughly 2.3 meters based on Carlos's automatic calculation, its form humanoid but distinctly other. The skin, if it could be called skin, appeared translucent, revealing what seemed like circuitry or neural networks of light running throughout its body, as if it were simultaneously biological and technological. Or perhaps neither, perhaps something his vocabulary had no words for. The face was elongated, elegant, with large eyes that had no visible pupils or whites, just depth, like looking into space itself. Carlos's heart hammered against his ribs, but he didn't run, couldn't run, held in place by something beyond fear, perhaps recognition, perhaps a part of his consciousness that had been waiting for this moment his entire life without knowing it. The being didn't move closer, respecting his space, and then a voice came, not through his ears but directly into his mind, clear and unmistakable. Dr. Carlos, 42 years, Earth years, astrophysicist specializing in cosmic cycles, married to Michael Chen, father to Emma Chen, waking every night at 2:47 for 8 months, reading books on consciousness and reality, feeling existential urgency you cannot name, questioning everything you built your life upon. Carlos gasped, not from the telepathy itself, but from the complete exposure, his inner crisis laid bare by something that shouldn't exist. How? He managed to think, and the being received it. We have been observing, not only you, but millions like you. Human consciousness is awakening to dissonance between what you were taught to value and what your deeper awareness knows to be true, searching for answers in spirituality, in quantum physics, in ancient wisdom, feeling urgency without understanding its source. Carlos found his voice, barely a whisper. The urgency. You know why I feel like time is running out. The being's response came with gentle certainty. Yes, because time is running out, not your personal lifespan, though that factors, but collective time. Earth is approaching a critical threshold in a cycle that repeats every 26,000 years, a reset of planetary consciousness, and your soul perceives its approach even though your conscious mind has been trained to dismiss such perceptions. The urgency you feel is your deeper awareness, screaming that you must understand and choose before the window closes. Carlos's scientific training wrestled with the implications. Reset? What kind of reset? Are you talking about some kind of extinction event, magnetic pole shift, solar catastrophe? The being conveyed patience, not physical destruction, consciousness division. Earth as a living system is raising its vibrational frequency, transitioning from third density consciousness to fifth density consciousness, and not all human consciousnesses will make this transition. There will be a split. Those who raise their frequency will experience fifth density Earth. Those who remain at third density frequency will experience third density Earth. Same physical location, different experiential realities, and the choices you make in the next 7 to 8 years will determine which reality you inhabit for the next cycle. Carlos's mind raced through implications, through physics he knew and metaphysics he had been studying. You're saying reality itself will divide, parallel timelines, quantum branching. The being seemed pleased by his framework. Your quantum physics approaches truth, yes, reality branching based on consciousness. But this is not random quantum fluctuation. This is a scheduled cosmic event encoded into Earth's existence, happening with precision every 26,000 years, connected to the precession of the equinoxes that you study, but have only understood mechanically, not consciously. Carlos felt something click. His research on the 26,000-year cycle suddenly illuminated with new meaning, not just astronomical mechanics, but consciousness evolution. Carlos's legs felt weak, and he sat down on his deck steps, still staring at the luminous being that had somehow become the most real thing in his reality. "Show me," he said, his voice steadier now, replacing fear with desperate curiosity. "If this is true, if this reset is happening, I need to understand the mechanism, the timeline, the evidence. I'm a scientist. I can't just accept claims, even from," he gestured at the being, "whatever you are." The being conveyed something that felt like approval. Your scientific skepticism serves you. Truth welcomes investigation. Come inside the craft. I can show you not theories but observations, not beliefs but data that your mind can process. records spanning hundreds of thousands of Earth years, evidence of previous resets, documentation of the current transition. Carlos hesitated for only a moment, looking back at his house where his family slept, at the normal life he had built, and then at this impossible opportunity to answer questions that had been destroying his peace for months. He stood and walked toward the craft, each step feeling like crossing a threshold from one reality into another. As he approached, the opening expanded and he stepped through, feeling a momentary disorientation as if passing through a membrane between dimensions. Inside, the craft was impossibly larger than its external dimensions suggested, a space that seemed to curve in ways that violated Euclidean geometry. The walls emitted soft, bioluminescent light, and the floor felt solid, but somehow responsive, as if the entire structure were alive and aware. In the center was a console, though console was too mechanical a word for what Carlos saw, a surface of flowing light and energy that responded to the being's presence, rippling like water disturbed by thought. The being gestured to a formed surface that rose from the floor, molding itself into a seat that perfectly accommodated Carlos's body. "What I will show you," the being communicated, "are direct observations recorded by my civilization over millions of Earth years. We are what you might call cosmic anthropologists, studying the evolution of consciousness across thousands of inhabited worlds. Earth is one of many we monitor, and what is happening here now has happened before, both on Earth and on other worlds. It is a natural phase of planetary consciousness evolution." Carlos settled into the seat, his scientific mind already forming questions. But before he could articulate them, the being touched the console, and reality dissolved. Carlos's consciousness expanded beyond his body, beyond the craft, and suddenly he was suspended in space looking down at Earth, the blue marble turning slowly beneath him. But he wasn't seeing it with physical eyes, he was perceiving it with something deeper. Seeing not just physical matter, but the energetic field surrounding the planet, pulsing waves of light emanating from Earth's core, spreading outward in rhythmic patterns. The being's narration came directly into his expanded awareness. What you perceive now is Earth's consciousness field, what some cultures call the planetary aura or energy body. This field has a frequency, a vibrational rate that determines the density of physical reality experienced on the surface. For the past 26,000 years, Earth has maintained what we call third density frequency, a specific vibrational rate that creates the reality you have known your entire life. Carlos watched as the visualization changed, showing the frequency as a wave pattern, oscillating at a steady rate, and overlaid on this pattern were markers, civilizations rising and falling. Ice ages coming and going, human history unfolding, all within this steady frequency. But then the pattern began to change, the frequency started accelerating, the waves moving faster, vibrating more rapidly, and the being explained, approximately 26,000 years ago, Earth's frequency was at this same acceleration point. The previous reset, advanced civilizations existed then, what your fragmentary myths remember as Atlantis, Lemuria, ancient high cultures that your archaeology has largely missed because they ascended, they raised their frequency to match Earth's new vibration and effectively disappeared from third density reality. Those who did not raise their frequency remained and experienced the continuation of third density Earth, repeating the cycle. Carlos's consciousness absorbed the information, seeing the visualization show a branching, one timeline where civilizations of light ascended to a higher frequency, another where humanity fell back into primitive survival, both real, both continuing, but experiencing different realities. And this is happening again now, Carlos thought, and the being confirmed. Yes, the cycle is completing. Earth's frequency began accelerating again in your year 1987, what some called the harmonic convergence. The rate increased significantly in 2012, what many mistakenly thought was an end date, but was actually a beginning date, the start of the final transition window, and the acceleration is now reaching critical momentum. Between 2025 and 2033, the frequency will stabilize at the new level, fifth density, and the split will be complete. Carlos's mind raced with implications. And humans, our consciousness, how does it work? Do we automatically follow Earth's frequency, or can we resist? The being showed a new visualization, millions of points of light representing human consciousnesses, each pulsing at slightly different frequencies, some vibrating slowly, densely, others vibrating rapidly, lightly. Human consciousness has free will, the being explained. You can choose your vibrational frequency through thought patterns, emotional states, and actions. Those who cultivate thoughts and emotions of love, compassion, unity, gratitude, service vibrate at high frequencies that align with fifth density. Those who cultivate thoughts and emotions of fear, hatred, separation, greed, control, vibrate at low frequencies that align with third density. And the critical point, once Earth's planetary frequency stabilizes at fifth density, maintaining third density consciousness on fifth density, Earth becomes extremely difficult, creating massive psychological suffering. Carlos watched the visualization transform, showing the current state of Earth, and what he saw made his gasp in recognition. The planet's energy field was pulsing rapidly now, accelerating visibly, and the points of human consciousness were diverging dramatically, some rising in frequency to match the planetary acceleration, glowing brighter, others resisting, vibrating more slowly, growing dimmer. And between these two groups, a growing gap, a chasm of frequency difference. This is what you're seeing in your world. Now, the being narrated, the polarization you observe, is not primarily political or economic. Though it manifests through those structures, it is consciousness, polarization, frequency divergence, humanity splitting into two groups based on chosen vibration, those aligning with the new frequency and those clinging to the old, and the gap between them grows daily, making communication increasingly impossible because they are beginning to inhabit different realities while still occupying the same physical space. Carlos recognized it immediately, the inexplicable divisions he had witnessed in recent years, friendships ending over seemingly minor disagreements, families fragmenting, societies splitting into groups that seemed to speak entirely different languages despite using the same words, the vitriol, the hatred, the absolute inability to find common ground. It's not that people are becoming more evil or more stupid, Carlos thought. They're literally vibrating at different frequencies, perceiving different realities. The being confirmed. Exactly. And as the planetary frequency continues to accelerate, this divergence intensifies. Those at lower frequencies experience increasing psychological distress, anxiety, depression, rage, desperation, because they are trying to maintain a third density consciousness in a planet that is already transitioning to fifth density. The dissonance creates suffering, while those at higher frequencies experience increasing clarity, peace, synchronicity, creative flow, because they are aligning with the planetary shift. Show me specifics, Carlos demanded. Show me what third density Earth will be like after the split, and what fifth density Earth will be like. I need to understand the actual difference in lived experience. The being touched the console again, and Carlos's consciousness was transported, no longer viewing from space but immersed in experience. Standing on a street in a city he recognized as Denver, close to his Boulder home, but something was fundamentally wrong. The sky was gray despite no clouds. The air felt thick and oppressive. Colors appeared muted as if reality itself had been desaturated, and the people, hundreds of people moving through the streets, but not one of them making eye contact with another, every face locked onto a screen, every person isolated in an individual bubble of fear and distraction. The being narrated as Carlos observed. This is third density Earth post-split, not destroyed, not uninhabitable, but dense, heavy, the consciousness frequency low. The primary characteristic is separation, profound isolation where every human experiences themselves as fundamentally alone, disconnected from others, from nature, from any higher purpose. This creates a society built entirely on fear, fear of survival, fear of scarcity, fear of other humans, and from fear comes all the dysfunction you see, amplified. Carlos watched as the scene unfolded, people arguing viciously over trivial matters, security everywhere, cameras on every corner, checkpoints, suspicion permeating every interaction, advertisements screaming about threats and needs, consuming endlessly but never satisfied, working constantly but never fulfilled. The suicide rate displayed on a news ticker was staggering, triple what Carlos knew from current statistics, and mental illness was labeled as the norm rather than the exception. And governance, the being continued, becomes increasingly authoritarian, not because of evil dictators, but because a population vibrating in fear demands control. They trade freedom for the illusion of security, surveillance increases, restrictions multiply, but the promised security never arrives because external control cannot solve internal frequency dissonance. So the cycle perpetuates, more fear, more control, more suffering. Carlos felt sick watching it, recognizing elements that already existed in his world, but amplified, concentrated, stripped of any balancing higher consciousness. What about technology, science, progress? The being showed his laboratories and research facilities in this third density future, and Carlos's heart sank. Technology advances, the being explained, but without wisdom. Artificial intelligence develops but is used for manipulation and control rather than liberation. Genetic engineering proceeds but serves profit rather than healing. Energy technology remains dependent on scarce resources because the consciousness of unity and abundance required for free energy cannot exist at this frequency. Scientific progress becomes trapped in materialism, unable to access the quantum and consciousness-based discoveries that require higher frequency awareness to even perceive. Carlos had seen enough of this reality. Show me fifth density Earth. Show me the alternative. The scene transformed instantly, and Carlos gasped at the contrast. The same Denver street, but radically different. The sky was vibrant blue, the air felt alive with energy. Colors were richer, more luminous, as if reality itself had higher resolution. And the people, they were looking at each other, actually seeing each other, smiling, connecting, moving with a grace and presence that seemed almost choreographed, but was natural, spontaneous cooperation rather than forced coordination. The being narrated with warmth. This is fifth density Earth post-split. Same physical location but higher frequency. The primary characteristic is unity consciousness, the recognition that all beings are interconnected aspects of one consciousness. This does not mean no individuality, but individuality within recognized unity, like cells in a body, distinct but connected, and from this recognition flows natural love, cooperation, creativity. Carlos watched people interacting with genuine interest, conflicts arising but being resolved through compassionate communication rather than escalation. Children playing freely without hovering paranoid supervision, elders being honored and included rather than isolated, gardens everywhere, food being shared, technology integrated harmoniously with nature rather than dominating it. The being continued the demonstration of fifth density Earth, and Carlos observed details that challenged everything he understood about human nature. In a marketplace, he watched transactions that seemed impossible, people trading goods and services with trust rather than suspicion. Some exchanges happening without any payment at all, simply offering what was needed because resources were viewed as abundant rather than scarce. And paradoxically, Carlos noticed, this created genuine abundance because the consciousness of lack that creates hoarding had dissolved. "Show me governance," Carlos requested. How do they organize society without the fear-based control structures? The scene shifted to what appeared to be a community gathering. Hundreds of people assembled, but the atmosphere was nothing like the political events Carlos had witnessed in third density. No one was shouting, no one was trying to dominate the conversation. Instead, there was a remarkable quality of listening, people speaking from the heart rather than the ego, decisions being made through consensus that emerged naturally rather than through voting that created winners and losers, and most striking, leadership that was based on wisdom and service rather than power and control. Leaders who were honored but not elevated, serving the community rather than ruling it. The being explained. Fifth density governance is based on unity, consciousness. When you recognize that harming another is harming yourself, when you understand that your well-being is inseparable from collective well-being, the entire structure of society shifts. Laws still exist but are minimal because they are self-enforced through consciousness rather than externally imposed through punishment. Crime dramatically decreases not because of better policing, but because the consciousness that creates crime, separation, lack, desperation, has dissolved. Carlos watched social services in this reality, and the contrast was stunning. Mental health care that actually healed because it addressed consciousness and frequency rather than just medicating symptoms. Education that nurtured individual gifts rather than forcing conformity. Economic systems that ensured basic needs were met as a foundation so that humans could focus on growth and contribution rather than survival. And most remarkable, a society that valued being as much as doing, that honored rest and contemplation and creativity as much as productivity and achievement. And technology, Carlos asked, how advanced is it? The being showed his research facilities in fifth density Earth, and Carlos's scientific mind reeled at what he observed. Technology that integrated consciousness directly, not through clumsy brain-computer interfaces, but through refined understanding of how intention shapes matter, energy systems that tapped into zero-point fields, because the consciousness of unity required to access such fields existed at this frequency. Healing technologies that worked with the body's energy field rather than against it. Communication technologies that enhanced natural telepathic abilities rather than replacing them with artificial substitutes. The being elaborated, at fifth density, your science and spirituality merge. You understand that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derivative, not the other way around. This opens entirely new paradigms of technology that are literally invisible to third density consciousness because the perception required to even conceive of such technology only exists at higher frequencies. The gap between third density science and fifth density science is greater than the gap between medieval alchemy and your current physics. Carlos absorbed this, seeing the staggering difference between the two realities. And a crucial question formed, but they're both real, both continuing. People in third density Earth and people in fifth density Earth are occupying the same physical planet. The being confirmed, yes, same planet, different frequencies like radio stations, broadcasting on different frequencies through the same space. If you are tuned to 95 FM, you do not hear 101 FM, even though both signals exist in the same room. Similarly, third density consciousness and fifth density consciousness will occupy the same Earth, but will perceive and experience radically different realities. They will see each other physically, walk past each other on streets, but they will not connect. They will be like ghosts to each other, visible but not reachable. Carlos processed the implications so families can split. A parent vibrating at third density and a child vibrating at fifth density, living in the same house but experiencing different realities. The being conveyed sadness. Yes, this is one of the most painful aspects of the transition. Frequency determines reality more than physical proximity. A family can occupy the same space, but if they vibrate at different frequencies, they effectively inhabit different worlds. The child will perceive opportunities and synchronicities that the parent cannot see. The parent will perceive threats and limitations that the child has transcended. Communication becomes increasingly impossible, not from lack of love, but from frequency incompatibility. Carlos felt the weight of this, thinking of his own family of Michael and Emma. Where do we stand? Where am I in this spectrum? And more importantly, how do I ensure my son has the opportunity to choose fifth density? How do I guide his without imposing? The being seemed to appreciate the question. You cannot choose for another, even your child. Free will is sacred. But you can model high-frequency consciousness. You can demonstrate love instead of fear, unity instead of separation, trust instead of control. Children are naturally high-frequency until the third density world conditions them otherwise. Your role is not to teach his to ascend, but to avoid teaching his to descend, to preserve his natural state rather than training his into dysfunction. Carlos sat in the craft, his consciousness gradually returning to his physical body after the immersive visions, and he felt simultaneously expanded and overwhelmed. The scope of what he had witnessed, the implications for every human on Earth, for his own life, for his son's future, were staggering. The being remained silent, allowing his to integrate, and after several minutes, Carlos asked the question that had been building. Why me? Why are you showing me this? I'm one person among billions. What am I supposed to do with this information? The being's response came with gentle firmness. You were chosen because of your unique position. You are a scientist who has begun to awaken. You have credibility in the mainstream world, but also growing awareness of realities beyond materialism. You are a bridge, capable of translating this information in ways that both scientific minds and spiritual seekers can receive. And you are a father, personally invested in ensuring the next generation has knowledge to make informed choices. Carlos understood, but felt the weight of responsibility. And what exactly am I supposed to do? I can't just publish a paper claiming aliens told me about consciousness resets. I'd be laughed out of academia, discredited, dismissed as delusional. The being conveyed understanding. You do not need to convince the masses. You need to reach those who are ready. Millions are awakening now, feeling the same urgency you felt, searching for answers in the same desperate way you were. They will find you, or you will find them. The information spreads not through forced persuasion, but through resonance. Those vibrating at the frequency to receive it will be drawn to it. Others will reject it, and that is their free will. Your task is not conversion, but clarification, offering a framework for understanding what people are already experiencing. Carlos nodded slowly, beginning to accept, but I need practical guidance. What specifically should people do? How does someone raise their frequency? What are the actual mechanics? The being seemed to have been waiting for this question. The mechanics are both simple and challenging. Frequency is determined by consciousness. Consciousness is determined by consistent thought patterns and emotional states. Therefore, raising frequency requires training your mind and emotions to habitually choose high-frequency states, love over fear, gratitude over complaint, presence over distraction, unity over separation, service over selfishness. This is not about perfection. It is about direction and consistency. Carlos understood the principle but needed specificity. Break it down for me. Give me a practical protocol that I can follow and share. Something concrete that people can actually implement. The being touched the console and a list appeared, not written words, but direct understanding transmitted into Carlos's mind, organized into clear categories. First, the being began morning practice. How you start each day sets your frequency for hours. Before engaging with external world, before checking news or email, spend 10 minutes in deliberate high-frequency cultivation. This is not optional if you are serious about transition, it is foundation. Carlos listened intently as the being detailed the morning protocol. Upon waking, before leaving bed, focus on breath for 2 minutes, not elaborate breathing exercises, simply conscious awareness of natural breath. This brings you into present moment and out of the mental loops that dominated your sleep. Then 5 minutes of gratitude, specific and genuine. Identify 5 things you are grateful for in this moment, not abstract concepts, but concrete current realities. The warmth of blankets, the sound of birds, the fact that your body functions without conscious control. Cultivate the feeling of gratitude, not just the intellectual concept. Then 3 minutes of intention setting, not rigid planning, but asking yourself, who do I want to be today? How do I want to show up? What frequency do I want to embody? Visualize yourself moving through the day from heart consciousness rather than ego consciousness. The being continued. Second, relationship practice. Every interaction is an opportunity to choose frequency. Third density relates through ego, trying to prove worth, to control outcomes, to protect image. Fifth density relates through heart, seeking to understand, to connect, to serve. Practical application. Pause before responding in any conversation. Ask yourself, am I responding from fear or love, from ego or heart? This pause is everything. The space between stimulus and response is where consciousness evolves. Carlos recognized this as transformative if actually practiced. Give me more specific scenarios. How do I handle conflict, criticism, disagreement? The being illustrated when someone criticizes you. Third density reaction is defense, counterattack, or collapse into wounded ego. Fifth density response is curiosity. Thank you for that perspective. What specifically concerns you? Can you help me understand your experience? This does not mean accepting false accusations. It means responding from secure center rather than reactive fear. When someone disagrees with your views, third density needs to win the argument to prove correctness. Fifth density allows difference. We see this differently, and both perspectives can coexist. This dissolves the need for intellectual dominance that creates so much third density suffering. Carlos absorbed this, recognizing how much of his life, especially in academia, was built on intellectual competition and the need to be right. What else? What other practices? The being continued. Third, consumption practice. Everything you consume affects frequency. What you eat, what you watch, what you read, what you listen to. Third, density consumption is unconscious, eating processed foods that numb rather than nourish, watching news that amplifies fear and outrage, engaging with social media that triggers comparison and inadequacy. Fifth density consumption is conscious, choosing foods that support clarity, choosing media that inspires and informs rather than manipulates, choosing social connections that elevate rather than drain. The being elaborated on the consumption practice with detailed precision that Carlos's scientific mind appreciated regarding food. The being continued, this is not about rigid dietary rules, but about consciousness in eating. Food carries frequency. Highly processed foods created in factories by underpaid workers under stressful conditions carry that frequency. Fresh foods grown with care and gratitude carry higher frequency. You do not need to be perfectly organic or perfectly vegan. You need to eat with awareness and gratitude, blessing your food before consuming it, thanking the sources, whether plant or animal, eating slowly and consciously rather than mindlessly. This alone shifts frequency significantly. Carlos thought about his eating habits, fast meals between meetings, barely tasting food, constant multitasking, and recognized the shift required. What about media consumption? I need to stay informed for my work. I can't just ignore the world. The being's response was nuanced. Awareness of world events is not the problem. Addiction to fear-based news is the problem. Notice how mainstream media operates, every story designed to trigger fear, outrage, division. This is not accident. Third-density consciousness feeds on these emotions, requires constant stimulation of fight-or-flight response. Fifth-density consciousness observes world events without emotional hijacking. You can be informed without being consumed, limit news consumption to specific times rather than constant updates, choose sources that inform rather than inflame, and most importantly, balance every negative input with positive action. If you learn about injustice, respond with compassionate service, not with paralyzing rage or despair. Carlos understood the principle and pushed further. What about relationships? I have colleagues, family members who are deeply invested in third-density consciousness, constantly complaining, judging, operating from fear. Do I cut them off? How do I maintain relationships without being dragged down? The being conveyed wisdom that felt ancient. You do not abandon people vibrating at lower frequencies unless they are actively abusive, but you set energetic boundaries. You can love someone without absorbing their frequency. You can be compassionate without taking on their suffering. Practical application. When someone complains, listen with empathy, but do not join the complaining. When someone judges others harshly, you can acknowledge their pain without agreeing with their judgment. When someone operates from fear, you can offer perspective without trying to fix them. And crucially, you limit time with consistently low-frequency people while increasing time with high-frequency people. Not from judgment, but from frequency management. You cannot maintain high frequency while constantly immersed in low-frequency environments. Carlos recognized several relationships that might need this kind of boundary setting and felt both relief and sadness at the implications. The being continued with additional practices. Fourth, nature connection practice. Gaia is ascending. The planetary consciousness is raising frequency. Connecting directly with Earth accelerates your personal ascension. Spend minimum 15 minutes daily in direct contact with nature. This does not require wilderness treks, walking barefoot on grass, sitting under a tree, tending a garden, watching sunrise. These simple acts attune your frequency to planetary frequency. The modern third-density world deliberately disconnects humans from nature because nature naturally raises frequency. Counteract this disconnection consciously and regularly. Carlos thought about his beautiful mountain location, the nature surrounding his home that he barely engaged with, always too busy, always focused on screens and abstractions. The irony of being an astrophysicist who studied the cosmos but rarely simply looked at the stars struck him. Fifth, the being continued, service practice. Fifth density, consciousness, recognizes that serving others is serving self, because all are one. Practical application. Perform one act of anonymous service daily. Anonymous is crucial because it dissolves ego. Buy coffee for the person behind you. Leave generous tips. Help a stranger without introducing yourself. Contribute to causes without seeking recognition. These acts train consciousness away from ego gratification toward heart expansion. Carlos was building a comprehensive picture now, asking, how long does this take if someone starts these practices today? How long until they've shifted frequency enough to ensure they experience fifth density Earth after the split? The being's response carried both encouragement and realism. Frequency shift is not linear, it is exponential. Initial weeks are difficult as you battle decades of conditioning, neural pathways deeply carved toward third density reactions. But as you persist, new pathways form, high-frequency choices become more natural, less effortful. Some people shift dramatically within months, others require years. The variable is not time, but consistency and sincerity. You can practice perfectly for a week and then abandon it. gaining nothing or practice imperfectly, but consistently for months and transform completely. Carlos pressed, but give me a time frame. We have until approximately 2033. That's 7 years. Is that enough? The being conveyed certainty. 7 years of conscious daily practice is more than sufficient. Even 3 years of genuine commitment can facilitate complete frequency transformation. The key is understanding that you are not adding something new. You are removing conditioning that obscures your natural high-frequency state. Children embody fifth-density consciousness naturally until it is trained out of them. You are not becoming something foreign. You are returning to what you were before third-density world shaped you. Carlos felt the weight of all the information settling into his consciousness, and he knew dawn was approaching, knew that soon he would need to return to his ordinary life that would never be ordinary again. But one more question demanded answer. What about those who don't make it? The people vibrating at third density when the split completes, what happens to them after physical death? Are they trapped forever? Is there hope? The being's response carried profound compassion. Nothing is forever except consciousness itself. Those who experience third density Earth post-split will live lives there, and when those bodies die, their consciousness reincarnates according to frequency. If they die still vibrating at third density, they return to third density Earth. The cycle continues until they learn what third density is designed to teach, lessons of separation creating such suffering that eventually consciousness seeks unity, lessons of fear creating such pain that eventually consciousness chooses love. Third density is not punishment, it is school, harsh school, but effective. Carlos felt tears forming, thinking about all the people he knew who would likely remain in third density. Colleagues, family members, friends trapped in fear and ego. Is there anything I can do for them? Can I help them shift? The being's answer was both empowering and limiting. You can model high frequency, you can share information, you can hold space for their transformation, but you cannot transform them. Consciousness evolution requires choice. Free will is inviolable. Trying to force someone to awaken only creates resistance. Your task is to embody fifth density consciousness so completely that people around you feel the frequency difference and become curious. Some will ask questions, then you can offer guidance, others will reject and judge. Then you release them with love, knowing their path is their own. Carlos understood, accepting the boundary between what he could control and what he couldn't. The being seemed to sense his readiness for the final transmission. Carlos, what I've shown you tonight is not entertainment, it is responsibility. You now carry knowledge that most humans do not possess. Knowledge of the reset mechanism, of the timeline, of the practical methods for frequency elevation. What you do with this knowledge will ripple outward in ways you cannot predict. Some who hear your message will transform. They will shift frequency. They will experience fifth density Earth. And remember that Carlos gave them the framework to understand what was happening. Others will dismiss you as delusional. They will mock and criticize. This is inevitable. And you must develop the frequency strength to continue regardless of external validation. Carlos nodded, feeling the truth of this, accepting the path that had just been laid before him. The being continued, you will doubt yourself. Especially in coming days and weeks, your rational mind will try to dismiss this experience as hallucination or dream. Expect this. The conditioning runs deep, but you will also notice confirmation, synchronicities, encounters with others who are awakening. External validation will come not to convince you, but to support you once you have already committed internally. Carlos felt the transmission completing, felt the energy beginning to withdraw, and he asked one final question. Will I see you again? Is there ongoing guidance, or is this a single intervention? The being conveyed gentle finality. Our direct meetings are rare. Consciousness at your frequency typically cannot maintain contact without damage. This encounter was possible because of your specific preparation and need. Ongoing guidance comes not from external beings, but from your own higher consciousness. As you raise frequency, you access higher aspects of yourself. Intuition strengthens, synchronicity increases, you begin to know without being told. This is the goal. Not dependence on external teachers, but activation of internal wisdom. Carlos accepted this, recognizing the independence it implied, both frightening and empowering. The being gestured toward the opening that was forming in the craft wall. Dawn light, now visible outside. Your family will wake soon. Return to them. With this knowledge, begin the practices immediately. Not tomorrow, not after you've processed everything. Today, this morning, the first test is whether you act on understanding or merely file it away as interesting information. Frequency shift requires action, not just knowledge. Carlos stood, his body feeling both heavy with responsibility and light with purpose. He moved toward the opening, paused, and turned back. "Thank you," he said simply, inadequate words for what had been given, but all he could offer. The being conveyed warmth. "Thank you for being ready to receive. Millions are being contacted in various ways, not all as directly as this. Some through dreams, some through intuitive downloads, some through human teachers. The awakening is orchestrated. You are not alone in this. Find the others. Support each other. The transition is easier with conscious community." Carlos stepped through the opening onto his deck, the cold October morning air shocking his back into physical reality. He turned to watch the craft, but it was already dissolving, not departing, but dematerializing. Shifting out of his frequency range, within seconds it was gone, and Carlos stood alone in his backyard as the sun broke over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the same mountains he had seen 1,000 times, but now they looked different, more alive, as if he was seeing them clearly for the first time. He walked back into his house, heard Michael stirring upstairs, Emma's alarm about to sound, normal morning routine about to begin, except nothing was normal. Everything had changed, and Carlos understood that the real test wasn't what he had experienced in the craft, it was what he would do now, in this moment, and every moment afterward. He sat at his kitchen table, closed his eyes, and began the practice, breathing consciously, cultivating gratitude for this new day, this new understanding, this opportunity to choose. And as he sat there, he felt his frequency rising, felt the possibility of fifth density Earth becoming not just concept, but lived reality. He had 7 years to transform, 7 years to help others transform, 7 years before the split completed, and Carlos, astrophysicist and father, made his choice. He would use every single day, starting now, starting with this breath, this moment, this choice, love over fear, presence over distraction, unity over separation. The reset was coming, the division was happening, but armed with knowledge and committed to practice, Carlos knew which Earth he would experience, and he would spend his remaining years ensuring his son and anyone else who was ready had the same choice, the same knowledge, the same hope. The alien had revealed the truth. Now it was up to humanity to decide what to do with it.